Hi, I'm Louise, and today I'll be ranking Gore Verbinski's filmography. Gregor Justin Verbinski, or otherwise known as Gore Verbinski, has been directing feature films since 1997 with his debut film Mouse Hunt. He has since gone on to direct films like Pirates of the Caribbean, that first initial trilogy, along with Rango, which won him an Academy Award. His filmmaking style and subjects are hard to define since his filmography is so varied. Three of his films are that first initial Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, and then everything else is sort of its own thing. As someone who is mostly familiar with the Pirates of the Caribbean films, I was curious to see what other films are in his filmography as he makes his return to directing after a 10-year hiatus. I wanted to celebrate this zany and fun director as he makes his return. He has a wildness to his films that I don't feel like I see enough of these days. He's willing to take things to an interesting conclusion that I don't always see coming. So I wanted to watch everything and sort of get a sense of like what sorts of things is Gore Verbinski interested in as a director, especially as someone who's directed pretty major films. Are there any similarities between his films? And I didn't find a ton. But it was fun watching through everything and sort of seeing some similarities between some of his films. There's not really a through line through everything, but it was definitely an interesting watch. So off we go to the ranking. At the bottom of my ranking is The Weatherman, which I thought was just fine. I think maybe if I were a man and also a father, this would be more of an emotional watch, but I was pretty disengaged through a lot of it. Nicolas Cage plays a weatherman who is successful at his job, but not in his personal life. It sort of feels like a less fun Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is funny since he was going to direct Secret Life of Walter Mitty at one point. It also feels really cynical in a way that I have a hard time believing because he's having a hard time and it just seems like it's all self-inflicted, which I guess is interesting in and of itself, but he's not an interesting guy who's causing his own problems, if that makes sense. Because there are some characters who you're like, like Marty and Marty Supreme, where you see him making all these bad decisions, but it's at least entertaining. Weatherman is not that way. Also, Michael Caine plays Nicolas Cage's father and has the least convincing American accent I've ever heard. They're supposed to be from Chicago, which has its own accent, but no one's doing that, so at least he had that going for him, but he's not even really sounding very American. But I guess if you can get Michael Caine in your movie, who cares? Nicholas Hoult is also in this film as a young man. He plays Nicolas Cage's son. He does a great American accent, because he's also British, but I mean, he's consistently been good in that. And it's fun to see this film after having seen his films from last year where, it seems like he's doing really well and is getting really big and a lot of attention, which is really fun. But it's fun to see him in something smaller and as a kid. And he did great from the few scenes he was in. So that was really fun. Next on my ranking is A Cure for Wellness. This film was hard to place for me and honestly hard to write about because there's a lot of it I really do like. The setting is eerie. The cinematography is fantastic. I think this is the best looking of all of these films. But the story is just okay. Maybe I'm just overthinking things, but it was difficult for me to follow sort of the logic. And I guess with this kind of movie, maybe thinking about things logically is not necessarily what they're going for here. But I just was having a hard time buying some of I don't know, sometimes we would jump into montages when I was like, wait, we need to figure out what's still going on over here. I don't know, the story just didn't work for me. And so by the time we get to the end, there's like this final confrontation that occurs and I'm sort of just so checked out of what's going on that I'm just like not invested in what's happening, even though it's a pretty exciting ending. And this is the second horror film directed by Gore Verbinski that's obsessed with water. The Ring is the other one, but we'll get to that. Which is interesting because in my head, I see a lot of films that use water as a healing device or a sign of life, but I love that he clearly just is afraid of water for some reason. Anyway, it was funny watching A Cure for Wellness and The Ring in the same week. That's just kind of how it happened. And I was like, wow, this guy really doesn't like water. was fun to see him film like this that clearly has a lot of money behind it. It's wild to me that someone let him make this film for the budget that it is, even though it doesn't really work altogether, but it looks amazing. I also feel like Dane DeHaan was sort of miscast as the lead, and I don't know if it was just the way he was directed. Usually I love him in whatever he's in. He's sort of this creepy guy, but I feel like if maybe someone else had been cast, I'd at least be a little more invested. I just didn't quite feel like I was engaged with his emotions and like what he was thinking and feeling. And so maybe that's what made the rest of the story hard to follow. I don't think that's his fault. That's a directing thing. The director is in charge of the actors and sort of guiding them to where he wants them to go. But I unfortunately did not love it. I will say though, in the film he's on crutches a lot of the time, which is really tricky. Being on crutches is really hard. So I'm like, well, at least he did that successfully. There's this whole scene where he's in a sort of bathhouse near the beginning on crutches, and I was like, he's gonna fall. He doesn't fall, but anyway, I just thought that was funny. It was fun. I mean, it's definitely odd, but that's not unusual for Gore Verbinski's filmography. Next on my ranking is The Lone Ranger, which I don't think should surprise anyone that this is near the bottom of the list. But the reason it's above the other two is there are some fantastic train sequences at the beginning and the end of the film. And they're really, really fun. They're just sort of nuts in a way that I think only Gore Verbinski would even try to do. And they're very, very fun to watch. The middle is pretty whatever. You could just watch the train scenes and have a good experience without having to watch the boring middle bit. The movie did not need to be 2.5 hours long. That is way too long for what this movie is. Also, the lead casting, especially now, is a bit wild to see. Not even 15 years later, you have Johnny Depp as a Comanche man, which is really weird. It was weird then, it's weird now. Yeah, and then of course both of our leads have accusations against them that I won't get into here, but needless to say, there's a reason we haven't really seen either of them in anything big for a while. But I will say this was competently directed otherwise. And they shot, from what I can tell anyway, a lot of this on location, and so it looks really incredible. I can't imagine Disney going for something like that now. But overall, I do think the train fights were really fun and worth watching if you can find them somewhere. Next on my ranking is The Mexican. The Mexican is a crime comedy, sort of a la Fargo and other Coen brothers films. It stars Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt in a tumultuous relationship. Pitt is sent on a mission to receive a special pistol in Mexico. While this is happening, Julia Roberts gets kidnapped by none other than James Gandolfini, who wants to use her to make sure Pitt does actually acquire the gun. The film is sort of split in two. We have the Brad Pitt story with sort of shenanigans where he's getting into trouble in Mexico, loses track of the gun a few times. This is sort of the more Coen Brothers-esque part of it. I will say it is fun to see Pitt doing a comedic role. I think he's more interesting doing stuff like that. But I was less interested in that than the other half of the story where Julia Roberts and James Gandolfini are up to as they go on a road trip essentially together down from Vegas to Mexico. Their relationship was really interesting to watch, to the point that when Gandolfini leaves the story, I was pretty disengaged at that point because I was less interested in Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt's relationship because they're sort of dysfunctional, obviously, but it's not in a way that I found super interesting. I will say it was fun to see sort of the DNA of Rango in this, because there's like this sort of element of this epic story sort of surrounding what's going on and seeing the Western elements that'll eventually pop up in Rango. But Rango does all of this much better than this film does. But I mean, this was only Gore Verbinski's second film ever, so that's not entirely surprising, which is crazy that he got to work with Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt on his second film. Gene Hackman also makes an appearance near the end of the film. It was fun to see him. He does a great monologue and then leaves, which I think is great for him. I just really need to watch more of his filmography. It's always a joy to see him. Next on my ranking is Mouse Hunt. I can't believe I had never seen this movie. I was watching it for the ranking, and I would have loved this film as a kid. And as an adult, it's also pretty funny. It feels sort of like, again, another Coen film, but for kids, or like just dark humor for kids. It starts off with a funeral, and the body falls out of the coffin, flies into the street and into a open manhole cover, like down into the sewer. That sort of tells you what the tone of the rest of the movie is gonna be like. And this was Gore Verbinski's first film. It's about two brothers trying to get rid of a mouse in a house they inherited from their father who has just passed away. Nathan Lane and Lee Evans play the brothers, and they're both hilarious. They're both fantastic together. And then Christopher Walken does pop in later as an exterminator they hire later in the film. He's also very funny. He's super serious about, he's super serious about exterminating things and is like ready for anything. That's a very, very fun scene. This movie is very silly and honestly pretty dark for a kid's movie, but I loved that about it. I wish more kids' movies now would take the children watching the film more seriously, because I think they can handle it. This was only the third film ever released by DreamWorks Pictures before DreamWorks even started doing animation. They hired Verbinski because they had seen some of his commercials in the early 90s, including a Budweiser frog campaign in 1995, which for this film makes a lot of sense how he got from those commercials to this, because there is a lot of animal work going on. The mouse, or mouses, who play the mouse, I thought were very cute. I loved how they used a mix of practical, actual mice, and then some animatronics and some VFX. Obviously, the VFX were used less than they would be now, just because that was much more difficult to do in 1998 than it is now. But it does make the mouse very convincing, because most of the time you're seeing it, it's a real mouse, and so even when you see the VFX mouse, your brain reads it as the real mouse. So anyway, I love that about it. Next on my ranking is Pirates of the Caribbean: Our World's End. Rewatching the Pirates films is what really inspired this list. I did that last summer, and I was curious what other things Gore Verbinski had directed. And he really shines in these films. They're the reason they were super popular, and still are pretty popular now. This is definitely the weakest of his trilogy, but it is by no means bad. It is miles ahead in terms of scale of production of most films these days. I'm trying to think of something modern to compare it to, but there really is no equivalent. It's also difficult to try and tell what the plot is. Because which I guess is sort of its weak point. There is a lot going on here, which you mostly can follow. As a kid, I found it pretty confusing, but the vibes were fun, so it didn't really matter. I mean, it's pirates doing pirate things. It's really more of a direct sequel to Dead Man's Chest than it is to the first film. But, I mean, yeah, I imagine if you're watching this ranking, you've seen at least some of these films. I did really love getting to see Elizabeth Swann's transformation in this film. We sort of see her in the beginning of the first film being timid and afraid, and then she becomes the Pirate King, which I think is really cool. This came out when I was 11, and so that was the perfect time for me to see and love this film. I loved getting to see her make big decisions, which was really unique for that time. And I don't know, I just really love seeing the end of her journey for this character. And her romance with Will Turner is just the best. I mean, I watched the fifth Pirates movie, and the best part is getting to see her again. Her and Will again at the very end. Spoilers, I guess, for that movie if you ever want to watch it. There's a lot going on in this film, and I wish some of the deleted scenes had made it into the film, even though it's already at an almost 3-hour runtime. The very beginning is super fun, and also the very end is really fun with that giant fight over the whirlpool. There's just so much going on there, and it's amazing. The middle sort of has a harder time, I guess similar to The Lone Ranger, but the rest of it, I mean, the ending is just so fun. And it's not even the best of the Pirates films, and it's really fantastic. I know they tried to make more in the 2010s. I've seen them both. They're both not as good. It's just not the same. Next on my ranking is Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. His newest film. This film has a lot going on, but the basic premise is a man from the future, played here by Sam Rockwell, announces that he needs to save the world and needs volunteers to help him. He has tried this 117 times before and knows quite a bit about the specific group and what may or may not happen. We do jump around a bit to see what some of his crew has been up to prior to this eventful evening, which play out like mini episodes of Black Mirror. It's one of those films that you can tell didn't get chopped up by executives. This is the film Gore Verbinski wanted to make, and while it's not perfect, there's definitely a lot to like here. It brings AI, social media, and violence in schools, which I was not expecting, but totally fits with the rest of the film, to the ridiculous but not too far off conclusions in a way that's interesting and horrifying, honestly. The cast is all really fun, but especially Sam Rockwell is really fun to watch. We never get his name, which I kind of love. He's just credited as the man from the future. He's wacky, but in a way that is very entertaining. He gets this monologue at the beginning of the movie where he has to give us A, the exposition for the entire film, B, set the tone of the movie, because he's sort of zany, and so you're getting a sense of like what to expect throughout the rest of the film, and C, not come off as a total jerk because he's like demanding things of people, but he's still sort of charming and approachable. Anyway, it's a hard thing that he's doing there, and he does it fantastically, and he's great for the rest of the film, but I found that scene in particular very impressive. There's some fantastic concepts and visuals that I will be thinking about for a long, long time, especially as we try and navigate this world post-AI and figuring out how to deal with it now that it's here. I don't think Verbinski really proposes any solution, which fits with the film too, but he definitely does not like it. Next on my ranking is The Ring, which I had never seen before this ranking. I grew up hearing about the premise of the movie, how you watch this VHS and then you die. And then I love how that's the first scene of the movie is sort of what played in my real life, where people were like, oh, did you hear about this movie where if you watch the VHS, blah, 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 and get into sort of the premise of the movie. I love that's how the movie starts, with two teen girls talking about this sort of crazy thing that they heard about. That definitely reflects my real life, not obviously the actual person dying, but just the fact that, yes, of course, that's how that sort of information gets spread. And I thought it was a great way to start the movie. I also love how blue the movie is. I know that's maybe a weird thing to talk about, but I just feel like now people don't color grade that boldly anymore, and it was really fun and totally fit the movie, like thematically and just tonally. And I love how rainy it is. Again, I really think Gore Verbinski is afraid of water because there's a lot of water in this film, a lot of scary water. Naomi Watts is really fantastic in this. I actually didn't even know she was in this film until I started watching it. And I was like, oh my gosh, there she is. That's so fun. Maybe not fun for her character, but fun that she's there. I loved getting to see her investigate what's going on. I didn't expect this to have so much DNA of like an investigative journalism film, but with a paranormal edge to it. My favorite movie ever is All the President's Men, so anything that has to do with journalism and researching things I find very interesting, so that was really fun for me. I love how this was rated PG-13. Like, there's no gore, really, which is kind of amazing. So many films, even in that time, just relied so much on blood and just the visceralness of that. But this was so much more psychological, which is way harder to do, I think. And so I found that very impressive. And it is very spooky for a PG-13 movie. Like, all things considered, it's pretty spooky. So anyway, it's very tight. There's not a lot of wasted runtime, which is nice too. All in all, it's just a pretty great horror film. Next on my ranking is Rango. This was so much fun. I saw it when it originally came out and thought it was okay, but I was also a teenager and had not seen a ton of Westerns at that time, and now I've seen a lot more Westerns. And man, it's just so much fun, especially if you've watched a bunch of Westerns. Rango is about a chameleon who falls out of a car traveling across the desert, and he comes upon a small Western town and fakes being a tough fighter who tries to help the town. This really isn't a kid's film. Like, yes, it's rated like a kid's film and there's animals in it and it's animated, but the themes are very adult. Like, the content isn't necessarily adult. There's some stuff that's adult, but if you're a kid, you're not going to understand it. And when I saw it in my teens, I was just sort of perplexed by what was happening because it gets pretty existential. And as a teen, I was like, it just went over my head. But as an adult, it's a lot more fun to watch. I think my favorite sequence in the film is the one in the middle with the bats, where the moles are riding the bats down the canyon and they're playing Ride of the Valkyries on banjos. That was just so much fun. I also loved how the character designs for the animals was so, not realistic, but just like none of the animals were cute, which I feel like we see a lot of times in animated films featuring animals. They were all ugly. Which you just, again, don't see in animated films, especially now that they're so glossy. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film on rewatch. I think if you saw it when it came out and haven't seen it since then, I would highly recommend watching it. It's just really fun, especially if you like Westerns. Next on my ranking is Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. I truly do love this movie so much. I went through a period in middle school when I came out. No, I would have been 10. Anyway, I went through a period where I would listen to the music all the time. I would watch the movie all the time. I watched the behind the scenes all the time of this film in particular. I loved so much about it. I loved how it expanded the story of the pirates, lore. There was a lot going on in that way. I thought the humor was really fun. Davy Jones is amazing. I rewatched this last summer and he looks incredible. I know we talk about that a lot, but it's still just astounding to see how well the VFX hold up in this film. And Bill Nighy gives such a fun performance as Davy Jones. It made me sad watching him in the third film, sort of just being pushed away and not as much of a threat, which makes sense. There were other things going on, but he was such a presence in this film. And the music with the organ, oh my gosh, just so good. I'm also a big kaiju fan, which I didn't know at the time. And now thinking back on it, this might have been sort of my introduction to big monsters attacking things. And I love that. Like, I love Godzilla. Pacific Rim is one of my favorite movies. So having a kaiju in a pirate movie basically is just so fun. So I think that's where that started for me. So I loved the Kraken. I loved just the horror of that and people being so scared of it. I love it. But Gibbs, rewatching all the films, it's just funny to me that he's sort of the exposition guy. Like, they'll be like, what is the Kraken? And he'll go into a whole monologue about it. And he delivers them so well. Watching these after having gone to, like, film school, it's very obvious that that's happening. And it sort of made me chuckle every time. But he's so good at it. It doesn't matter. It was funny to notice on rewatch that he's just always happens to know a lot about different places, different things. He's just sort of the lore master of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. And I love that. At the top of my ranking is Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. I don't think this should surprise anyone. I love this movie. I do think I like Dead Man's Chest a little bit more, but this one is just so good that I couldn't not put it at the top. And it's basically perfect. It's perfectly paced. No line is wasted. It's genuinely funny even now. The music is fantastic. The production design is purposeful and excellent. The VFX don't hold up as well as Dead Man's Chest, but for 2001, they're pretty good. And honestly, the skeletons being sort of uncanny looking works in their favor. Jeffrey Rush is so good. Like, I could do a whole video on his performance in this film. He is just giving this amazing performance when he really didn't need to. It's an adventure movie, but having a great villain in a film like this really just sets it apart and makes it so much better. And he really just does such a good job. I love him in this film. He is so, so good. And it just makes me sad we don't really see anything like this anymore. It was fun growing up. These films were a huge part of like the behind the scenes of the Pirates of the Caribbean films were so influential on me and wanting to go into filmmaking. And I just feel like we don't see that in the same way anymore. I mean, DVDs, unfortunately, are not the same. Even if you buy a disc of something, it's not always guaranteed to have some sort of behind the scenes material, which is really unfortunate because, at least in my generation, so many of the people that I went to film school with were influenced by movies like this, like Lord of the Rings, that had a ton of behind the scenes material and all this stuff. It's just unfortunate that that's not as much of a thing anymore. So, anyway, I love the Pirates of the Caribbean films. This one is just perfect. It's casted perfectly. It's hard to articulate. It's just that good to, like, it's all just so well done. And that's my ranking of Gore Verbinski's films. I hope we see more of him in the future now that he's back making films again. I would rather not have to wait another 10 years to see another one of his films. His unique vision is a breath of fresh air in this filmmaking landscape of legacy sequels and remakes. And thank you so much for watching. I have been spending a lot more time working on longer videos, and I found that really satisfying and really fun. I don't have a ton of work to show for it yet, but I have some fun videos coming up. And so I appreciate you guys watching my stuff and commenting, and it's just, you guys are the best. It's really fun for me to make, so it's fun when people enjoy it too. So thank you so much.